Name is Adema. I'm the Vice President for Africa for World Bicycle Relief, and I distribute bicycles on the African continent to um, impoverished rural communities who might uh, gain a step up the socioeconomic ladder by having a bicycle. I think it starts from the need on the continent. So the challenge of distance is a very real one for many communities and people on the continent, which means people who have to walk either to farmers to get their produce to market, the incredibly kind-hearted community workers who go around promoting things like preventative healthcare, or and what's very dear to my heart, children who have to walk very long distances to get to school. So what we try to do is to make sure that those people on the African continent who most have a need to make the jump, if you like, from walking to perhaps one day owning a motorized vehicle, are able to have reliable and durable bicycle in between to do whatever it is that they need to do. Well, I would hope that, particularly as we look at a younger generation, that younger generation has had opportunities that they might not otherwise have had. So it's very empowering for me. For instance, when I visit a school where we've distributed bicycles, and you see the children 1 or 2 years later, and you can actually see a difference in the pass mark in the number of students who've been able to make it to the university because they were able to get to school earlier, put in a couple more hours of schoolwork, and because they actually turned up at school, because it's not so fun to think of a 20-kilometer commute every day on top of the household chores that you have and the other things. And lastly, when they got home at night, they were also again able to put in a few more hours of study, which at secondary school is quite critical. So it's really, you give a bicycle and from the next day you really are already making an impact on that young child's life. So I reimagine an Africa where every young girl has an opportunity to go to secondary school. I reimagine an Africa where every young girl has an opportunity to be safe in their travels as they go to secondary school, free from a risk of sexual or physical assault as they travel, as they walk typically during the day. I reimagine an Africa where a girl born in a village in Burkina Faso can actually dream of going to a university like Harvard. I reimagine an Africa where these children will have an opportunity to make life better for subsequent generations. I want to see more bicycles in the hands of rural school children. I would like to see that effort driven by us as Africans. I think that for a long time, we have been, in many cases, over-dependent and reliant on help from the outside when these are our own communities and we have the capacity to help our own people. And I think every one of us, every African that I ever speak to had the experience of walking to school, knows of someone who had the experience of walking to school. So I would like to see some of that Ubuntu or Harambe or whatever other African word you want to translate it to, but that spirit of togetherness translating to our own community. What we can bring to the table as an organization is we can bring the model of the bicycle. It's a reliable, proven and tested bicycle. We can bring the ability to make it happen operationally on the ground. So we know how to go to and work with communities to identify needy children within a school environment and to keep it running and also to measure that it's actually happening and the impact of what is happening. So quite literally, I need a more passive involvement in terms of financial resources to make it happen. And I think everyone can make their own contribution, all the way from to the level of their abilities, deciding just to make a contribution to put into the cost of a bicycle, to enlisting their organizations to scale this effort even more. I have an initiative that I'd like to launch called Adapt to School. You can go back to whatever school is dearest to your heart and try to make sure at least the children in those schools are catered for. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see each of us taking that action. I know I probably have spoken too much. So I know that sometimes we get a little bit fatigued by the need that we see in Africa and what is it that we can do, and do we even have time to make a contribution on or to do something about all the different challenges that we face. But I think I'm kind of offering a solution and then asking for an investment behind that solution, a financial investment that does not require too much effort. I think every organization in Africa that wants to grow and that wants to be a world-class organization requires to have the best talent. And I think this is not unique as a challenge even to global organizations. But I would, highly encourage your audiences that there is growth in Africa. There are things happening, and we are looking for the best talent. And you can have a very exciting journey, because in many cases we are in startup or entrepreneurial phases, the types of opportunities that you do not get offered in more mature businesses in developed parts of the world. Well, I think I've been a long time believer that universities like Harvard can use a global stage to bring more eminence and intentionality to where Africa is growing. I see this as an evolution of a discussion, going from sort of looking at Africa as a social-cultural study to more starting to get into the future and starting to discuss things like economic growth, leapfrogging, innovation, technology as relates to Africa. And I'm just really happy to see Africans taking their destiny into their own hands in partnership with the university. And I think it couldn't have been more aptly placed on the continent of Africa rather than having these forums as we typically would away from what we're trying to solve for. I believe what I do is very much tied to my personal goals as a person, what I do professionally. I want to be held accountable for that. I think I'm very much 100% aligned with my future goals, my passions for girls and education and what it is I'm doing. So I want to see that succeed. One person I'd really like to meet is the president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And the reason I say that, she's a Mason Fellow like I am at Harvard, and her story has many parallels to my own. But in particular, I really like the statement that she makes about, if your dreams don't scare you, then they're not big enough. And I think it's a constant personal challenge that I make to myself. So as we seek to scale on the continent with World Bicycle Relief, we have operations in 4 countries, although we distribute to over 18, including here in Ghana. And I'm very keen to hear from this audience and from your wider audience, because information is scarce in Africa. where might there be those pockets of opportunity that we could make a real difference with the provision of bicycles to children to help them to go to school.